Chloe Bennet looked up at the porch swing, then to her dad. "Do you think this street has room for people like us?" Alan didn't answer at first. He was still adjusting the angle of the folding chair on their front porch, tapping it twice before settling into the weathered cushion. The porch swing creaked softly beside them, swaying in rhythm with the breeze. Across the street, a man clipped his hedges with mechanical precision, each snip matching the cadence of a bird's call. No one waved. No one smiled. "Well," Alan finally said, sipping from his old thermos marked Greenville Fire Department Retired, "it's got room for someone's idea of perfect." He squinted at the cul-de-sac sign Chloe had been staring at earlier. Its paint was chipped, but the lettering remained stubbornly legible: "Order is happiness, HOA Code Section 1A. Boxes lined the edge of their porch, unopened since the move 2 days ago. Chloe's sketchpad sat atop one, corners curled slightly from use. She opened it, flipping past pages of old neighborhoods drawn in pastel blues and browns. Streets full of crooked mailboxes and dogs on porches. Streets that had sound. This one felt quiet in a different way. Chloe wandered down to the sidewalk and crouched by the curb. The pavement was smooth, too smooth. But there, barely visible under a layer of dust, she found the faded outline of a hopscotch grid. It looked like no one had played on it for years. She traced the outline with her finger, her hand trembling slightly as she imagined the last kid who might have laughed here. Behind her, the front door of the house across the street opened. A woman in a crisp beige cardigan stepped out, holding a small notepad. She walked with purpose, heels silent on the concrete. Her hair was set in a style that didn't move, her expression practiced neutrality. She paused just long enough to look Chloe over, not cruelly, but clinically. "We keep things tidy here," the woman said, not quite smiling, and moved on. Chloe stood up slowly, dusting her knees. Her dad had risen too, mug still in hand. "That's her," he said softly. "Karen Whitmore. HOA president." "She didn't say hello," Chloe replied. "She never really does." From the other end of the street, 2 boys on bikes rolled by. They weren't racing or laughing, just coasting, almost silently. One of them glanced toward the woman with the notepad. When their eyes met, the boy immediately looked away and pedaled faster. "Did she write something down?" Chloe asked. Alan shrugged, but his jaw tightened. "Maybe. Don't worry about it." "I wasn't," she said, but she was. She glanced down again at the sidewalk, then back at her sketchpad. Later that afternoon, as Alan unpacked a box labeled "Kitchen, Fragile," Chloe took her sketchpad to the porch. The swing rocked gently under her as she began to draw. Not houses or sidewalks this time, just a single heart, then another beside it, then a third, smaller one. She shaded them lightly, as if they might disappear if she pressed too hard. The smell of something sweet drifted faintly from next door. Cinnamon, maybe pecan. It reminded her of Grandma's kitchen, another porch, another life. She closed her eyes and listened. No children playing. No dogs barking. Just the buzz of a distant lawnmower and the whisper of the wind through 2 perfect trees. A movement caught her eye. A paper was pinned to the neighborhood bulletin board by the sidewalk. It hadn't been there that morning. Chloe walked over, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. The heading read in neat, serif font. "Notice 2 residents, sidewalk gatherings discouraged without prior HOA notification." Chloe read it twice. Then a third time. She turned back toward the house. Her dad was sitting on the porch again, sipping from his thermos. "Even for kids?" she asked. He didn't respond. Or maybe he didn't hear her. Behind her, a slow creak announced the return of the woman in the beige cardigan. Karen passed without a word this time. But her eyes flicked once to the notice, as if confirming it was still in place, then briefly to Chloe, and then away. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac. A curtain in the house next door shifted, revealing a pair of eyes that quickly vanished. Chloe stepped back onto the porch and picked up her sketchpad again. Her heart shapes had smudged slightly from the breeze. She added a new one, this one with cracks running through the center, and closed the book. As the evening settled, a voice broke the quiet. This street used to sound like summer. Now it's just quiet. Mrs. Lois Green walked by without stopping, her hands tucked into the pockets of her cardigan. She didn't look at Chloe when she said it, but her voice carried a weight that made Chloe pause. And then, just as quickly, the street fell silent again. This is my street, Karen said firmly. Children don't run the sidewalks. Not here. The ball rolled to a slow stop against the curb, nudged gently by the last gust of Sunday wind. Chloe stood a few feet away, her shoe just behind the white-painted edge of the cul-de-sac. The late afternoon sun cast long, lazy shadows that stretched like reaching fingers across the pavement. The weekend had been quiet, too quiet. Until now. Earlier that day, she had noticed something near the storm drain, a chalk drawing half erased by time. It looked like a sun, its rays crooked and faded, as if drawn by a child years ago and then forgotten. Chloe had squatted by it, touching the warm concrete lightly, tracing its outline with the edge of her sneaker. That small sun had felt like a whisper. Today, she was hoping for something louder. Sammy had invited her to play. Or maybe it was Olivia. Neither had really said much, just a shy kick of the ball toward her as she passed, and a glance that said, "You can if you want to." Chloe hadn't asked permission. She simply stepped into the space they made for her, toes tapping the pavement in rhythm with the game. For 20 minutes, they had played. Carefully. Not loud, not wild. The kind of game where laughter was swallowed before it could echo. Then the door opened. Karen Whitmore's heels made no sound as they stepped onto the sidewalk, but everyone noticed. The ball skittered to a stop. Chloe turned her head just in time to see the clipboard appear, rigid, brown, official in the way a blank sheet of paper never should be. "Violation," Karen said, clicking her pen, "sidewalk obstruction." The words weren't shouted, just pronounced. Measured, like a weather report or a recipe. Olivia took a step back. Sammy's shoulders dropped. "She always does this," he muttered, barely audible. Karen didn't acknowledge him. Her eyes moved across the small group like a scanner. "You don't live here," she added, gaze landing directly on Chloe. Chloe blinked, suddenly aware of everything, the tightness in her shoelaces, the weight of her dad's gaze from the porch, the way the chalk sun now looked like it was melting beneath her feet. She opened her mouth but nothing came out. Karen didn't wait. Her pen hovered over the clipboard. Sidewalk misuse. Prolonged standing. Unsupervised. "I do," Chloe said, but it came out too quiet. Karen raised an eyebrow. "What was that?" Chloe stepped forward, a few inches only, and raised her hand. "I live here." It wasn't loud, or dramatic. Her voice didn't shake, but neither did it soar. It landed in the space between Karen's shoes and the edge of the clipboard like a pebble dropped in still water. Karen stared at her for a long moment. The pen paused, then slowly met the paper. She wrote something, methodical strokes, as if this were simply a task like measuring mulch depth or counting mailboxes. Chloe's heart beat fast, not from fear, not entirely. She felt her chest move in rhythm with the breeze, the kind that tugged at loose strands of hair and made flags ripple. She looked down. Her shoelace had come undone. One lace draped across her sneaker like a string left trailing from something unraveling. She bent down, tied it slowly, buying time, feeling heat in her cheeks but not tears. Karen turned without another word. Her footsteps receded toward her house, crisp and even. The clipboard never dipped. At her door, she didn't look back. She vanished inside with the same cold certainty with which she had emerged. From the porch, Alan rose slightly from his chair but stopped short of stepping down. His thermos rested on the armrest beside him. He caught Chloe's eye and nodded once, not approval, not warning. Just acknowledgement. The ball was still by the curb. Olivia retrieved it, whispering something to Sammy that Chloe didn't catch. Then they left, murmuring thanks. Not for the game, for the moment. A truck rolled slowly down the street, engine low. Jared Cole's pickup. He drove with one hand on the wheel, eyes scanning the houses. As he passed, he slowed just enough to glance toward the sidewalk. He saw Chloe. She didn't wave. Neither did he. But he tapped the brakes lightly, just enough for the tail lights to glow once in quiet solidarity. Karen glares, writes something on her clipboard, then turns away in silence. Jared slows his truck, watching carefully. "You spoke when none of us did," Mrs. Lois said, handing Chloe a slice of pecan pie. Chloe looked at the wedge of golden brown filling with surprise, its crust neatly folded like something pressed by memory, not recipe. The plate was chipped on one side, and the pie was still warm, a rarity on a street where warmth was usually measured by insulation value. Labor Day had arrived with the quiet hush of a whisper. Flags hung from porch poles, stars and stripes fluttering without celebration. No grills sizzled, no smoke curled from backyard fences. It was a holiday observed only in name, not spirit. That morning, Chloe had taped her drawing to the front window. The three hearts from her sketchbook now stared outward to the street, shaded softly in pencil. No bold statements. Just quiet presence. When Alan came in from the yard, he smelled like cut grass and maple leaves. He was still wearing his old Greenville FD t-shirt, a faded ring of salt near the collar. He stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the kind of concentration usually reserved for emergencies. Chloe sat at the small table, watching him in the mirror of the toaster oven. "You know," he said, "your mom would have loved your guts." Chloe didn't answer. She poked at her plate, lifting the corner of a pancake just to let it fall again. Alan poured more batter. She had this way of making people feel like their voice mattered. Even if they didn't think it did. The doorbell rang. Outside stood Mrs. Lois Green, holding a pie tin wrapped loosely in foil. Her cardigan sleeves were pushed to her elbows, and her shoes had grass stains near the toes. She smiled with a softness that didn't reach her eyes, not out of insincerity, but habit. "I baked too many," she said simply. "And you've got the kind of girl who deserves a proper slice." Chloe opened the screen and accepted it, murmuring thanks. Lois lingered on the porch. "You reminded me of someone yesterday. Someone I haven't seen in a while." She didn't clarify who. "It's been over 10 years since we shared anything on this street." Alan came out, wiping his hands. "That long?" Lois nodded. "Last time was Halloween, 2012. Before the rules changed. Before Karen decided scarecrows weren't seasonally appropriate." She let out a half laugh, then fell quiet. "That was the last year I saw kids laugh out loud around here." Alan exchanged a glance with Chloe, but said nothing. Lois handed over a second slice wrapped in a napkin and wandered off down the walkway. Later that afternoon, a knock sounded, firmer, more deliberate. Jared Cole stood at the door, holding a manila folder and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'd like to talk," he said. "Not about your daughter. About her effect." Alan stepped aside, gesturing toward the porch. Jared took the same chair Karen had once used for HOA meetings, a detail not lost on either of them. "I've been on the board for 4 years, Jared said, setting the folder down. "Karen took over 18 months ago." Since then, he opened the folder. Neatly sorted forms. Stamped citations. Envelopes with HOA headers. "She's issued more fines in 1 year than the previous board did in 5. Everything from Halloween pumpkins to sidewalk chalk." Alan flipped through the pages. One showed a notice addressed to Mrs. Tran for excessive wind chimes. Another listed unauthorized lawn seating against Mr. Rivera, who used a plastic folding chair due to hip surgery. "This isn't about violations," Jared said. "It's about control." Chloe watched from behind the screen door, unseen. Jared leaned forward. "Your daughter," she said 4 words. "And it shook this place." Alan said nothing. His hand rested on the folder like it might slide away if he let go. I'm calling for a board meeting, Jared continued. Next Saturday. Emergency session. I need homeowners to be present. Your vote matters. And, your presence matters even more. Alan exhaled slowly. You're asking me to stand up to her. I'm asking you to stand with her. Chloe stepped back as the men stood. Their voices dropped into low tones. She wandered to the front walkway and sat on the edge of the curb. The pie plate beside her was empty now, save for a few crumbs. The light had shifted. The sun no longer cast long shadows but draped the street in something warmer, softer. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of chalk, drawing small circles on the concrete near the porch. When Alan joined her, he said nothing. He just sat beside her, the thermos now quiet in his hands. Then Chloe noticed something. It was faint, maybe pink or faded red, but there, just beside the mailbox post, was a chalk heart. She hadn't drawn it. She looked around. No one was nearby. But someone had spoken, not loudly, not with words, and she had heard them. Chloe sees a chalk heart drawn outside their porch, she didn't make it. Sidewalk chalk, lawn chairs, even wind chimes. Alan asked. These are the new violations? He said it under his breath, eyes scanning the typed agenda clipped to the metal stand in front of him. The garage smelled faintly of gasoline and floor polish, with a hint of stale coffee wafting from a folding table in the corner. Overhead, one fluorescent light flickered occasionally, a slight stutter that made the shadows shift just enough to feel unwelcome. Karen stood at the front, beside a portable projector, her clipboard clasped tightly to her chest. She wore a navy blazer over a pale blouse, buttoned all the way up. Her voice was steady, but something about the tempo, the clipped consonants, the lack of pause, made it feel more like a defensive rhythm than a confident speech. Chloe sat in the back row, a notebook in her lap, pencil quietly tracing shapes. She hadn't spoken since they arrived, hadn't asked why the heart she'd drawn outside their porch was gone this morning. She just looked at the damp smear near the mailbox, nodded once, and packed her bag. Item 3, Karen announced. Clarification of seasonal decoration limits. No unapproved signage, drawings, sidewalk art, or items suggesting non-uniform aesthetics. Jared sat 2 seats to the left of Alan. His hands were folded over his knees, but one foot tapped lightly, a barely audible tempo against the concrete floor. He raised his hand slowly. Could you cite where that's listed in the HOA handbook? He asked. Karen didn't look at the folder. She tilted her head. It's consistent with the spirit of Section 2C. Which reads? Jared prompted. Karen hesitated. I don't have the handbook in front of me. Alan leaned slightly toward him, whispering without looking, she's getting nervous. Karen's tone sharpened. I am the handbook, Mr. Cole. A few heads turned. Not many. But enough. Mr. Finch coughed into his hand. Ms. Salas adjusted her reading glasses, avoiding eye contact. Chloe's pencil paused briefly, then continued. She wasn't drawing hearts this time, more like overlapping rectangles, skewed slightly, stacked unevenly like chairs hastily folded and stored. Karen resumed. Wind chimes will be addressed in Item 5. As for sidewalk gatherings, unless directly related to official HOA-sanctioned activities. Jared raised his hand again, slower this time. Permission will be required? Notice, Karen corrected. What qualifies as notice? Board awareness, she replied. To you? To the chair, she said. You are the chair, Jared said quietly. Karen's silence was audible. The projector fan whirred louder for a moment. Chloe erased a line with the side of her thumb. Alan shifted in his seat. Mr. Finch tapped the side of his shoe against the leg of his chair. No one moved toward the coffee. No one touched the stack of printed minutes beside the door. As the meeting droned on, amendments, clarifications, proposals, Chloe turned her page and began sketching the room. Not the people exactly, but the way the light looked when it flickered, the way Jared leaned slightly forward when Karen paused, the curve of her father's hands as they tightened on the folded agenda. She wasn't drawing to remember, she was drawing to understand. Then something small happened. A folded note passed discreetly between chairs. Finch to Jared. Quick, smooth. Jared opened it under the table, eyes flicking to the single sentence. I'm tired of this too. Let me know if you vote. Jared didn't react. Not then. He folded it again, tucked it into his shirt pocket, and resumed his fixed gaze toward the front. Karen's voice had not wavered, but her tempo had slowed. The meeting ended without applause. Without comment. Just the scrape of chairs and the soft rustle of papers being collected. Alan stood but didn't move. Chloe snapped her notebook shut and stood beside him. Outside, the air had cooled. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the street. Garage doors up and down the block remained shut. Curtains barely shifted behind glass. Chloe looked at the sidewalk and said nothing. Jared walked with Alan to the car. They didn't speak until they reached the passenger side. It's time this street remembered it doesn't belong to one person. Let's see if a few lanterns and folding chairs can break a dictatorship, Lois said, tying her apron. She was standing in the Bennett's driveway, sleeves rolled up, the strings of her faded orange apron knotted tightly at the small of her back. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg drifted from the tray of miniature pies resting on a folding table beside her, and her hair was pinned back with a decorative clip shaped like a maple leaf, probably from some forgotten Thanksgiving display. Chloe crouched by the curb, chalk in hand, carefully writing welcome in looping cursive near the mailbox. Her handwriting wasn't perfect, but the letters curved with care, stretching across the pavement like an invitation too polite to be refused. Maple Drive hadn't looked like this in years. Fall banners swayed gently from porch rails. A string of white lanterns zigzagged across two lawn chairs and anchored at Alan's truck mirror. Someone had set out an old stereo, its wood veneer cracked, crooning Sinatra softly enough to blend with the rustle of early autumn leaves. Alan unfolded chairs while pretending not to glance toward Karen's window. Chloe had passed Sammy and Olivia's house that morning with a smile and 2 words, "We're starting." She hadn't explained. Just handed them each a cupcake and walked away. Now they sat side by side at the edge of the driveway, uncertain but present. Olivia's mom brought out iced tea. Mr. Rivera arrived with a bag of kettle corn. A pair of teens from 3 doors down leaned against their car, one holding a tray of lemonade cups with nervous pride. Jared arrived with an ancient slide projector, the kind that clicked loudly and hummed when it warmed. He nodded toward Alan and motioned to the garage door. Within minutes, they had stretched a white sheet across it. Images flickered into focus, photos from Maple Drive block parties long gone, a pumpkin carving contest in 1994, a watermelon eating race, kids in dinosaur costumes sprinting past parked station wagons. The projector clicked. Faces lit up with something close to laughter. Karen's blinds twitched. Across the street, she stood behind her glass door, arms folded, clipboard visible even indoors. She didn't open the door. But her phone appeared in her hand. Alan murmured, "She's calling the hotline." Jared kept clicking through the photos, unfazed. Lois passed out pies like communion. Chloe watched everything from the swing, fingers stained with orange chalk. A man with suspenders, Mr. Dell, Chloe remembered, brought over a bucket filled with ice and soda cans. "Haven't shared one of these since Clinton was in office," he said to no one in particular. Someone bumped the stereo. It switched songs, the speaker catching halfway through "Fly Me to the Moon." Then the air shifted. Karen's door opened. She stepped out, crisp blazer buttoned, clipboard in hand, lips pressed together so tightly the color had drained from them. Her heels clicked on the pavement as she moved deliberately toward the gathering. Before she reached the driveway, Mrs. Salas stepped forward, a pie server still in her hand. "You'll be wondering why the hotline didn't ring," she said gently, voice steady. "I unplugged it this morning. We needed a night off." Karen paused mid-step. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the modest crowd, the flickering images of a block once joyful, now stirring again. The lanterns swayed lightly in the breeze, the word welcome glowing faintly at her feet under the amber porch lights. Karen walks toward them, clipboard in hand, lips tight. "If you think this gathering will go unnoticed," Karen began, "you are gravely mistaken." Her voice cut through the twilight like the clink of a dropped fork in a quiet diner. The neighbors of Maple Drive, once seated comfortably in lawn chairs under stringed lanterns and surrounded by folding tables of fall snacks, fell into a hush. Even the stereo seemed to understand the moment, its speaker humming softly as the last notes of Sinatra faded into background static. Chloe sat beside the lemonade table, her hands tucked into her sleeves, the chalk dust from earlier now smudged across her palms. Karen took 2 more steps forward. "In accordance with HOA guidelines," she continued, lifting her clipboard, "this event constitutes an unauthorized gathering. You are in violation of sidewalk obstruction ordinances. And per the handbook, excessive noise after 6 p.m. is prohibited." She paused dramatically. "You will all receive formal citations." Nobody moved. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves in the maple trees above and the faint clink of a pie tin being nudged across the table. Lois stood behind the lemonade pitcher, her lips pressed in a firm line, eyes on nothing. Jared stepped forward. He wasn't holding a clipboard. No megaphone, no microphone. Just a worn blue folder tucked under one arm. "You've cited people for wind chimes," he said quietly. "For pumpkins. For singing on their porches." Karen opened her mouth, but Jared continued before she could interrupt. "This is Mr. Rivera's citation." He held up a paper. "For sitting outside in a folding chair due to a hip injury. And this," he pulled out another, "was issued to the Tran family for using solar lights along their walkway. You called them light pollution." Someone in the back gasped, a sharp intake of breath quickly silenced. Alan stood, his thermos untouched for once. He looked over the crowd, then at Chloe. He hadn't planned to speak. But something shifted. "For years," he said, voice low but firm, "we've been told to just get used to how things are run." He looked at Karen. "Not anymore." The words hung in the air. Not shouted. Not dramatic. But they landed like an old truth finally spoken aloud. Karen's jaw tightened. Jared unfolded another sheet of paper. "These are signed statements from 6 current and former board members. And the original HOA bylaws. Nowhere in them does it say one person decides what this street should feel like." Chloe rose from her chair. She didn't speak. In her hands was a folded sheet of drawing paper. She stepped quietly into the center of the circle, the lanterns casting warm light around her like a stage without a script. At Karen's feet, she knelt and placed the picture face up, a drawing of Maple Drive, not perfect, not straight. But there were neighbors in it. Smiling. Sitting together on porches, children playing, pies cooling on railings. And not a single clipboard in sight. Karen's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "We're calling for a vote," Jared said. "With signatures. And it starts tonight." No one cheered. No one clapped. But chairs shifted, papers rustled. And for the first time in a long time, no one looked toward Karen for direction. Karen's grip on her clipboard loosens. She looks down at Chloe's drawing, and walks away without a word. "Tonight," Jared said, "we choose between control or community." The community library's meeting room wasn't large, just 12 folding chairs in a circle, a plastic table with a dented urn of coffee, and 2 windows that fogged slightly from the breath of early fall air pressing against the glass. The room smelled like aged paper and cinnamon tea, a faint trace of history lingering beneath the fluorescent lights. The votes would be silent, like everything else had been here for too long. Chloe walked past the mailbox that morning. Her chalk welcome still lingered, faded now, the curl on the W nearly erased by rain or foot traffic. But the line was still readable, like a message someone didn't want to forget, even if they couldn't say it out loud. She didn't say much that day either. She sat quietly beside her father, a wool hat pulled low and her sketchbook unopened for once. Alan gave her hand a small squeeze beneath the table before rising to speak. Jared stood at the front, no longer hesitant, his folder well thumbed. "Before we begin the vote," he said, "I want to present what's been gathered, not to shame, but to clarify." He laid out the pattern, more than 70 citations issued in less than 18 months. Some absurd, others merely cold. He read a few aloud: unauthorized orange wreath, excessive bird noise, chalk markings of unknown intent. A soft laugh escaped someone near the back, but it died quickly. Karen sat to one side, her arms folded tightly. The clipboard wasn't in her hands. It rested on the table beside her like a relic no one wanted to touch. Alan took the floor. He cleared his throat, then looked across the room. "When we moved here," he said, "I told my daughter to get used to the way things are run." He looked at Chloe. She didn't. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It held the weight of something turning, not dramatically, but undeniably. "She spoke," he continued, "when no one else had the breath to. 4 words. But they were enough to remind people that this street belongs to its people, not its rules." Karen shifted. Her lips pressed together. When she spoke, her voice held less certainty than usual. "I was keeping order," she said. "That's all I ever tried to do." "No," Mrs. Salas said from her chair, rising slowly. "You were keeping quiet. And we want welcome, not order." Jared nodded once. Slips of paper were passed down each row, folded sheets, a single checkbox at the top: retain chairperson, yes/no. No one spoke while voting. No one looked around. The shuffle of papers, the scratch of a pen, the slide of ballots into the small metal box at the front, that was the only sound. When the last ballot was counted, Jared looked up. "The vote is clear," he said. "Karen Whitmore is removed as chair, effective immediately." Karen didn't flinch. She stared at the floor. Jared picked up her clipboard and walked it to the center table. He set it down slowly. "You're welcome to stay," he said gently. "Just not in charge." There were no cheers. No applause. Just the hush of something long overdue falling into place. Karen stood. She didn't reach for the clipboard. She turned toward Chloe, her eyes tired but clear. She studied the girl's face, the steady gaze, the stillness that had become louder than any argument. "I never thought silence could be so loud." Chloe sat cross-legged on the curb, chalk in hand, sketching a neighborhood she finally believed in. The sidewalk beneath her was cool and dry, tinged with a soft layer of gold from the falling leaves. Her fingers moved slowly, intentionally. Each line traced a memory that was still becoming real. Up the block, a wooden sign now stood where the old metal HOA plaque used to glare in the sun. This one was hand-painted, with curling letters carved deep into the grain. "Respect builds home, Maple Drive." A breeze lifted the edge of the paper cups on the cider table. Alan moved quickly to steady them, adjusting the tray with one hand and lifting the kettle with the other. The steam rose like a ribbon, catching the afternoon light and carrying the scent of cloves and apples through the gathering crowd. It was the first real fall harvest event the street had hosted in over a decade. Lois stood behind the pumpkin bread table, apron freshly ironed, her face beaming with something between pride and disbelief. Children darted between tables without hesitation, laughing fully. Someone had carved jack-o'-lanterns, not for Halloween, but just because they could. Chloe noticed one shaped like a cat with uneven whiskers and smiled. Her banner stretched across the driveway, welcome in broad strokes, flanked by hearts and swirling leaves. It had started as a private drawing, just like the one she kept in her sketchbook. Now it greeted everyone. Neighbors wandered over with trays and pots and bowls. Mr. Rivera arrived late, carrying a slow cooker of chili and a stack of mismatched bowls. He took his time walking, but the smile he gave Chloe was steady. Jared stood a few feet from the tables, arms crossed, watching quietly. Someone clapped him on the back, a rare gesture. He nodded in response but didn't say much. A folded sheet of paper peeked from his jacket pocket, The reinstated block party fund, signed by every current board member. Alan bent to help an elderly couple with their chairs, adjusting them beneath the string lights that had been repurposed from someone's attic. Chloe watched him for a long moment before reaching into her bag. She walked toward Lois, holding a piece of drawing paper folded in half. "I wanted you to have this," she said. Lois opened it slowly. Inside was the old drawing, the one Chloe had placed at Karen's feet, resketched, the lines bolder now, the people more distinct. Pies sat on porches. Children played. No clipboards in sight. "You saved more than pie," Chloe whispered. Lois's eyes shimmered. She folded the drawing again, carefully, as if it were more fragile than it looked. Chloe returned to the curb. She picked up her chalk one last time, found a clean stretch of sidewalk, and bent forward. With steady strokes, she wrote. "This street belongs to everyone, even quiet voices." She underlined the last 3 words in green. Not bright, just clear. Around her, people ate. Talked. Laughed. Porch lights flicked on slowly as the sun dipped low. Paper lanterns swayed gently above the cider table, casting dancing shadows over the driveway. Somewhere, a child was trying to whistle through candy corn. Alan walked over, his cup of cider half empty. He sat beside her on the curb, his knees cracking slightly as he bent. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We didn't move here, Dad. We arrived." On a quiet street once ruled by silence, a few words, a single drawing, and a handful of folding chairs reminded neighbors what it meant to belong. Chloe never raised her voice, yet her quiet courage echoed louder than any rule ever written. When communities choose connection over control, even the deepest cracks can become places where light gets in. Perhaps it's never too late to step outside, to notice the welcome written in chalk, and to add your name beside it.